Disrespect never explodes at first. It begins as something small enough to ignore. A smirk that lingers a second too long. A joke that lands slightly sharper than necessary. A tone that carries just a hint of dismissal. Most people miss the pattern because they are trained to avoid conflict. They tell themselves it is nothing. They convince themselves maturity means tolerance. But power does not operate on good intentions. Power operates on signals. And the moment someone disrespects you, they are not expressing humor or personality. They are gathering data. They are testing your response threshold. They are measuring how much they can take without resistance. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He lived in a world where subtle disrespect often preceded open betrayal. He knew that if you allow the smallest boundary to be crossed without consequence, you communicate something far louder than words. You communicate that your position is flexible, that your dignity is negotiable, that your silence can be purchased cheaply. The dangerous part is that most disrespect hides behind plausibility. It comes disguised as teasing, sarcasm, playful criticism. Confronting it feels dramatic. So people laugh along. They brush it off. They choose peace over posture. But what they do not realize is that every time they laugh at their own expense, they reinforce a hierarchy they did not consciously agree to. Disrespect is rarely about the content of the words. It is about the reaction it provokes. The one who controls the reaction controls the frame. And if you react predictably, emotionally, or not at all, you surrender that control before the real game even begins. Most people think respect is earned slowly through kindness and consistency, that if they prove themselves valuable, loyal, agreeable, others will naturally treat them well. This belief sounds noble. It sounds civilized. But in competitive environments, respect is not granted out of appreciation. It is granted out of calculation. People respect what feels costly to offend. If offending you carries no consequence, then there is no incentive to restrain themselves. This is why overly nice individuals often find themselves surrounded by subtle manipulators. Their politeness becomes predictable. Their forgiveness becomes expected, and expectation reduces perceived strength. When someone interrupts you repeatedly and you smile each time, you are not signaling patience. You are signaling tolerance. When someone dismisses your opinion and you over-explain yourself calmly every time, you are not proving intelligence. You are proving that your position requires validation. Machiavelli's philosophy was never about cruelty for its own sake. It was about understanding human tendencies without illusion. He observed that people push where resistance is weak. They test what appears negotiable, and they retreat from what feels firm. This does not mean you must become aggressive. It means you must become consistent. Because inconsistency invites experimentation. If you respond strongly one day and lightly the next, people will keep testing to discover which version they are dealing with. But if your boundaries are stable, calm, and unyielding, the testing stops. Not because they suddenly admire you morally, but because the cost-benefit calculation shifts. And once people begin calculating before speaking to you, you have already changed the dynamic. The darkest way to handle disrespect is not explosive anger. It is controlled absence. When someone disrespects you, they expect engagement. They expect defense, argument, or emotional reaction. Even laughter serves them. It confirms that they reached you. But when you remove engagement entirely, something uncomfortable happens. The energy they projected has nowhere to land. Silence, when chosen deliberately, becomes confrontation without words. Imagine someone makes a cutting remark in front of others. Instead of smiling or responding, you look at them neutrally and let the silence stretch. No visible hurt, no visible anger, just stillness. That stillness forces them to sit with their own words. The room feels it. The dynamic shifts. People begin to question who miscalculated. Silence in this context is not weakness. It is evaluation. It communicates that you are deciding whether further interaction is warranted, and unpredictability generates caution. Humans are comfortable around predictable targets. They are uneasy around controlled ones. Machiavelli wrote that it is safer to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. Fear in this sense is not terror. It is uncertainty. It is the awareness that crossing you may produce consequences they cannot fully predict. And unpredictability disrupts casual disrespect. When people cannot map your reaction instantly, they hesitate. That hesitation is the beginning of respect. Because respect often begins as caution before it evolves into recognition. Consistency is what transforms isolated reactions into reputation. A single strong response means nothing if it is followed by tolerance the next time. Boundaries are not statements. They are patterns. Every time someone interrupts you and you calmly stop speaking until they finish, then resume without apology, you reinforce structure. Every time someone makes a joke at your expense and you refuse to reward it with laughter, you reinforce structure. Every time someone attempts to diminish your time and you withdraw access instead of arguing, you reinforce structure. Over time, people stop testing because the result is predictable, not explosive, not dramatic, just firm. Inconsistent individuals become exhausting to navigate. Sometimes they tolerate everything. Sometimes they explode unexpectedly. That unpredictability does not create respect. It creates instability. But calm consistency creates hierarchy. It establishes that certain behaviors will always meet the same response. Machiavelli understood that authority grows through repetition. Each reinforced boundary strengthens perception. Each exception weakens it. People talk, they observe, they adjust. When your reputation becomes that of someone who does not bend under subtle pressure, you rarely need to defend yourself verbally. The defense has already been embedded in your behavioral pattern. And once your presence alone signals cost, disrespect becomes rare not because people changed morally, but because you changed strategically. Another level of power emerges when you stop taking disrespect personally and start treating it as intelligence. Every slight reveals something. Who disrespects you only in private but flatters you publicly? That is calculation. Who mocks your ambitions but praises others with similar goals? That is insecurity. Who becomes dismissive when you set boundaries? That is dependency losing leverage. When you view disrespect as data rather than insult, your emotions stabilize. Instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of defending, you adjust. This shift alone makes you dangerous in social dynamics because you are no longer easily provoked. You are analyzing. You are mapping patterns. And patterns predict future behavior. Machiavelli believed understanding human nature was the foundation of strategy. Most people prefer illusions. They want to believe everyone means well. They excuse repeated patterns as misunderstandings. But repeated behavior is rarely accidental. When someone shows you through small acts that they do not value you properly, believe the pattern, then adjust access accordingly. Reduce information, reduce time, reduce proximity, not with drama, with calm detachment. When access to you becomes conditional on respect, people self-regulate, and those who do not self-regulate remove themselves naturally. That is efficiency. You do not need to fight everyone. You only need to become difficult to exploit. Over time, something subtle but powerful happens. Your aura changes, not through intimidation, but through composure. You no longer rush to fill silence. You no longer over-explain your decisions. You no longer chase validation after disagreement. This composure communicates stability, and stability commands space. People sense when someone is internally anchored. They also sense when someone seeks approval. The one who seeks approval is easier to manipulate. The one who appears self-contained is approached with caution. Crafting this presence requires restraint. Speak deliberately. Move without urgency. React minimally. Never over-invest emotionally in minor provocations. The goal is not to appear cold for theatrics. It is to appear unshakable. When someone disrespects you and receives nothing but calm recalibration in return, they are forced to confront their own position, and often they lower it voluntarily. Because human beings adjust to perceived strength. They align upward toward those who seem internally secure. When your presence consistently reflects that crossing you is inefficient, People begin filtering themselves before speaking. And that self-filtering is the quiet proof that your strategy is working. The final layer of this approach is long-term positioning. You are not trying to win every exchange. You are trying to shape perception over months and years. Every calm boundary enforced is a brick. Every disengagement from petty provocation is cement. Every refusal to overreact is reinforcement. Eventually, your name carries weight before you enter rooms. People know you are not reactive. They know you do not tolerate patterns of subtle disrespect. They know engagement with you requires a certain standard. And that knowledge shifts behavior automatically. The people who once tested you casually begin choosing words more carefully. The ones who thrived on provoking emotional reactions lose interest because the reward disappeared. Higher quality individuals, however, feel more comfortable. They prefer interacting with someone whose standards are clear. Respect becomes default because deviation feels costly. This is not about becoming feared in a theatrical sense. It is about becoming structurally respected. When you no longer treat disrespect as an emotional wound but as a strategic signal, you gain leverage. And leverage changes outcomes. The darkest way to handle disrespect is not to fight louder. It is to become harder to move, harder to read, harder to provoke. When your silence carries weight, your consistency builds reputation, and your detachment filters character, you no longer chase respect. You become someone whose absence is more powerful than argument. And in any environment, the individual who controls their reactions controls the hierarchy.